All right, another week one prediction video from yours truly, Uncle Lou. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live on YouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Also, in addition to that as well, hey, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, year round. There is no off season. There is no off season here. This is an underrated game. I think. I'm going to do a whole bunch of these too every week, so people don't have to listen to a bunch of games they don't care about. I used to do like one of these videos where I'd preview or predict 10 games in a video or something. You know, a lot of people don't only care about certain games. So I just did West Virginia and Pitt. So if you're interested in that, and click back, check that out. I'm going to do a whole series of these every week. But sticking with the Thursday games, did West Virginia and Pitt. Penn State on the road at Purdue. Underrated game this week, I think. A Big Ten versus Big Ten matchup in week one of the college football season. This one comes on Thursday night. Could be a pretty good game. Purdue, I believe, finished second in the West last year. Penn State found itself in the top 10 for a little bit last year, first half of the season. Injuries and a terrible second half derailed their season, and they finished completely out of the mix before losing to Arkansas in the Outback Bowl. But Sean Clifford's back at quarterback. Dude's been in college for 100 years. He's one of these sixth-year super senior type deals. You know, players are getting an extra year of eligibility because of COVID. Sean Clifford's one of those players that's taking advantage of that. So, got to keep him healthy. Penn State was a totally different team with Sean Clifford last year versus without. Now, he didn't play great in the Outback Bowl after missing some time with an injury, but he's clearly the best quarterback on that roster. In fact, the rest of the quarterbacks on Penn State's roster, the rest of the scholarship quarterbacks, are all either freshmen or redshirt freshmen with next to no playing time at all. So, barring injury, Sean Clifford's going to be the quarterback for Penn State for the entirety of this season. But Penn State's got some other issues too. I mean, their offensive line was horrible last year. Penn State was, I don't want to say loaded, but they had 3 different 4-star running backs last year that played. None of them had a 100-yard game at all for the entire season. Not one 100-yard rushing game for any of those running backs. Penn State's got to fix that, because regardless of what you think about Sean Clifford, even if you're kind of a Sean Clifford fanboy maybe, without a running game, Sean Clifford's is limited. They lost Dotson, who was their best wide receiver. Now, Penn State is a talented team. If you're just going by recruiting rankings, they're clearly a more talented overall team than Purdue. But Purdue was a really good team last year. They won 9 games. They went 9-4. The most wins they've had in a season since 2003. So, best season they've had in almost 20 years. Led, of course, by quarterback Aiden O'Connell. And he's back. This is his 3rd year now in the system under Jeff Brom. And Purdue quarterbacks, it almost seems like it doesn't matter who it is. Purdue quarterbacks put up ridiculous numbers. It's just sort of the system Jeff Brom runs. I'm not saying that to say that Aiden O'Connell's not any good. In fact, it's the opposite. You know, the longer a player spends in that system, the better he gets at running it. But Purdue's been either first or second in the Big Ten in passing every year for the last 4 or 5 years. I think they were second last year behind Ohio State, maybe. Or they might have been first. But anyway, they've been in first or second throwing the ball under Jeff Brom the last 4 or 5 years. So you know what Purdue wants to do, right? Defensively, Penn State gets a couple of guys back from injury that missed the majority of last year. That should help them out. But they need some help at linebacker and defensive line. I think the strength of Penn State's defense is its secondary, though, which could be good news in this matchup against Purdue, who we all know wants to sling the ball around, right? Penn State's got to go on the road, but they're favored by 3. Favored by 3, and this is a dangerous game, Not as dangerous as a typical Thursday night game where a favored team has to go on the road. You know, during the season, you see a lot of weird outcomes in these Thursday games. They're short weeks. The kids' schedule gets off of whack. They're traveling on days when they're not used to traveling, all of that. And you see a lot of like ranked favored teams lose on the road on Thursday games, percentage-wise, relative to what you see on a Saturday. Not so much of an issue in a week 1 game because you didn't have a game this past Saturday. So you only have 5 days to prepare. No, you could have, in theory, been preparing for Purdue for 8 months if you wanted to. But I think this will be a really good game. Some people are surprised that the line's only 3 points. I'm not surprised at all. You know, going into week 1 of a season, a lot is based on the previous year, and Penn State was borderline horrible the last half of the year, and Purdue was busy winning 9 games and throwing for 1,000,000 yards. Now, Purdue's got some issues of its own they've got to address this season. They lost their best player on offense, wide receiver Bell. Was it David Bell? I know it was something Bell. Anyway, they lost him to the NFL, and they lost their best player on defense, too, a defensive lineman. So, they've got some holes they've got to fill, too. I'm excited to watch this game. I really like the Big Ten. I know because I'm a Georgia fan, there's kind of a perception, I think, amongst Big Ten fans that, because I'm an SEC guy that I just hate the Big Ten. I love the Big Ten. It's clearly the second best conference. You can make the case last year it might have been the best conference, but having Georgia and Alabama in the title game might have swayed it a little towards the SEC. But the point is the Big Ten is a really, really good football conference and a fun conference to watch. And this is a cross-division matchup here, Penn State versus Purdue. I think it's going to be a really good game. My overall thoughts on each individual team, forget the fact that they're playing each other for a second. I'm a little bit higher on Penn State than the average idiot is this year in the offseason. I think Penn State stock is kind of down nationally because of the way the season ended, and maybe a lot of people aren't taking into account the injuries that they had, particularly to Sean Clifford and a couple of guys on defense. But I like Penn State. I think Sean Clifford is a good quarterback. I don't think he's a great quarterback. The good news about a Sean Clifford is you pretty much know what you're going to get. It's not really a crapshoot. And if you have a quarterback that's not great, but whatever he is, he's consistently that, you can game plan for that, right? If you're Penn State's offense. He's been there long enough now. Like I said, he's a sixth-year super senior. The offensive staff at Penn State knows what Sean Clifford can do, what he can't do, what he's comfortable doing, what he's not comfortable doing. The plays he really, really likes, the plays maybe he's not so good at. They know those things. They got to find some running backs. The offensive line is going to have to play better in this game. And that defensive front's going to have to find a way to get pressure on Aiden O'Connell, the Purdue quarterback. Because if you let Aiden O'Connell sit back in that pocket, it doesn't matter. And they brought in some transfer receivers, and they've got some new pieces on offense too. But it doesn't matter. If you let Aiden O'Connell sit back in that pocket, he will pick you apart, and Purdue will win this game. My thoughts on Purdue, I think they're a good team, not a great team. They're kind of like Penn State. I think Penn State's good, probably not great. I don't think anybody thinks Penn State's making the playoffs. I don't think anybody thinks Purdue's making the playoffs. But these are two pretty good teams, and really, either team could win this game. The perception of the Big Ten East versus the Big Ten West, of course, is that the Big Ten East is the better of the two divisions within the Big Ten, and I agree with that. So you look at a Purdue who goes 9-4 in the Big Ten West, okay, and then you look at Penn State's record. Purdue was a better team, especially the last half of the season last year, than Penn State, regardless of which division they played in. The game's at Purdue, so Penn State, you got to go on the road, hostile environment, primetime game, week 1. The fans are going to be going nuts there. I think this will be a really, really good game. 3-point spread in the favor of Penn State. It is very dangerous to play a road favorite when they're a low favorite like that. There's a gambling expression called PTHD, prime time home dog. A lot of gamblers love betting on prime time home underdogs. Games played at night where the home team is a small favorite. And 3 points is very small, especially in college football terms. 3 points is a very small spread. How many points is Purdue getting for home field in this game? 1, maybe. Maybe 1. It's not the greatest home field advantage in all the sports, that's for sure. But I do think this crowd will be riled up. Week 1, they've been waiting 8 months to watch their team play. Nationally televised primetime game to kick off the season in week 1 on a Thursday night when there's not 100 other games on to take attention away from. And the best part of all about week 1, everyone's undefeated. Well, except Nebraska, but you know what I mean. So fans, whether you're talking about Purdue fans or Penn State fans or fans of any other team that's yet to play, hope springs eternal. You don't have any losses yet. So the fans will be ready to go for this one. I gotta pick Penn State. I gotta be honest with you. I think Penn State's the better team. They brought Manny Diaz in at defensive coordinator. I think that's a hire that has not been talked about enough this offseason. Manny Diaz sort of got pushed out of the way down at Miami last year when Miami did not have a terrible season, especially the last half of the year. If Miami would not have been able to get Mario Cristobal, Manny Diaz would still be the head coach at Miami. There was only one other coach. There was only one coach out there that Miami was going to fire Cristobal for, and that was Manny Diaz. That was going to fire Manny Diaz for, and that was Mario Cristobal. It's not like Miami was 3-9 with Manny Diaz and they fired him in October or whatever. I mean, this thing dragged on. They didn't make a decision on Manny Diaz until they were 100% sure they could secure Mario Cristobal. And Manny Diaz, regardless of what you think of him as a head coach or his time at Miami, is a great defensive mind. Even Miami fans who now pretend to hate Manny Diaz because they're in love with Super Mario, they're all over the internet. Go look a year or 2 years ago when they got Manny. They're all over the internet talking about what a great defensive mind he is. He's a good defensive mind. I don't think that can be the importance of that can be overestimated in terms of Penn State adding him to that roster. I do think that's a hire that makes an immediate difference. Is it Jim Knowles going to Ohio State type of difference? Probably not. Ohio State is more talented to start with defensively, and Jim Knowles, I think right now, is considered probably one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. I don't know if Manny Diaz is considered one of the best, but he's really good, and I think it's an upgrade at that position for Penn State. So I think Penn State's defense will be better just because they have Manny Diaz there. The only way you can pick Penn State in this game, and I'm picking Penn State, you're putting a lot of trust in Sean Clifford in this game, that he's seen a lot of football. He's played a lot of football. He's been around forever. He's played in the most hostile of environments that you can possibly play in. Columbus, Ohio against Ohio State. He's played in the Big House against Michigan. So going on the road to Purdue is not gonna shake Sean Clifford. He has seen and been in much bigger and more hostile environments than what he's going to see at Purdue. So I have to put my faith in Sean Clifford that he's going to go in there and play well, mistake-free football. And as good as Aiden O'Connell is, replacing a lot of options there at wide receiver, including the best wide receiver you had last year who went off to the NFL, maybe the Purdue offense starts out. In other words, I don't think the Purdue offense is going to hit the ground running in 22 the way it ended in 21, which was a win against Tennessee in a meaningless bowl game that nobody watched. I would, again, sort of like what I said with the West Virginia Pitt game, there's not really an outcome that would surprise me in this game either. Purdue is capable of beating Penn State. This isn't a thing where I'm coming on here and saying, well, Purdue's got no chance. Believe it or not, Purdue does have a chance to beat Penn State. However, like I do a lot of times in week one, I have to sort of go with my gut and my sort of off-season feelings about a team. Look, week one can be hard, right? You think you know about a team. You think you know what they're going to do offensively, defensively. But every single year by week 1 or 2, we have a whole list of names that we're like, oh my God, where'd this guy come from? And you never know when something like that's going to happen or what team it's going to happen to. So, I could definitely be wrong, but I'm higher on Penn State. I've got them ranked in my top 25. Right now, I do not have Purdue in my top 25, although if I did like an others receiving votes deal, they would be there. They'd be very close. And if they beat Penn State, they'll take a significant jump into my top 25. That I can tell you. Home game for Purdue, a big one. Cross-divisional game, a conference game to kick things off. Sean Clifford, last year of eligibility. James Franklin just signed a huge contract extension in the offseason to keep him away from LSU or Southern Cal or whatever job he was pretending that he was going to leave for. Lots of pressure, I think, on both teams to win this game in week 1. 3 points is not that much of a spread, and since I think Penn State's going to win, I might as well go ahead and take the points too. So give me Penn State -3. I think they win the game outright, and I think they win by more than 3 points. But shout out to Purdue.